When did you realize your stepmom was jealous of you? I was 15 when Dad married Veronica, and at first I thought I'd won the lottery. She was everything my mom wasn't. Young, glamorous, and actually interested in spending time with me. She'd take me shopping for clothes that weren't from Walmart, helped me with makeup tutorials, and even convinced Dad to let me dye my hair auburn like hers. "We're going to be best friends," she'd say, squeezing my hand during our mani-pedi sessions. For 6 months, it was perfect. Then I started getting attention at school. The first red flag came during parent-teacher conferences. My English teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, was gushing about my essay on social justice. "Delilah has such a mature perspective," he said. "Her writing shows real depth." I beamed, waiting for Veronica to share my excitement. Instead, she cut him off. "She gets that from her father," she said coolly. "I've been working with her on structure." That was news to me, but I stayed quiet. The second incident happened at Dad's company barbecue. His business partner, Craig, was asking about my college plans when Veronica appeared beside us. "Oh, Delilah is still figuring things out," she said, wrapping her arm around my shoulders possessively. "She's lucky she has me to guide her." Craig looked confused. "But didn't you just tell me she's only been your stepdaughter for 8 months? Veronica's grip tightened. Time doesn't matter when you have natural maternal instincts. Things escalated when I got cast as the lead in our school musical. I'd been in choir since middle school, but this was my first major solo role. Dad was thrilled and immediately started planning to invite his entire office. Veronica had a different reaction. "Are you sure you're ready for that kind of pressure?" she asked during dinner. "Stage fright can be really embarrassing." "I'll be fine," I said. "Mrs. Martinez thinks I have real potential." "Mrs. Martinez probably tells all her students that," Veronica replied, cutting her steak with unnecessary force. "It's important to have realistic expectations." She started finding reasons for me to miss rehearsals, sudden dentist appointments, family obligations that couldn't be rescheduled. When I protested, she'd sigh dramatically. "I'm just trying to prevent you from being humiliated, honey." The breaking point came 3 weeks before opening night. I was running through my songs in my bedroom when Veronica burst in without knocking. "You need to keep it down," she snapped. "Some of us have work to do." "Sorry," I said, confused. "I thought you were watching TV downstairs." "Well, I'm not anymore. Your screeching gave me a headache." Screeching. The word hit like a slap. "I'm just practicing for the musical," I said quietly. "About that," she said, sitting on my bed uninvited. "I've been thinking. Maybe you should consider dropping out." "What? Why?" "Honey, I've heard you sing. You're adequate. But the lead requires someone with real talent. I don't want you to embarrass yourself." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. This wasn't concern. This was something else entirely. That night, I heard her talking to Dad downstairs. "I'm worried about Delilah," she was saying. "This musical thing has gone to her head. She's becoming arrogant. She's just excited." Dad replied, "Let her have this." "Tom, I'm serious. She's developing an ego that's not based in reality. Someone needs to bring her back down to earth before she gets hurt." I crept closer to listen. "Maybe you're being too harsh," Dad said carefully. "I'm being realistic," Veronica shot back. "That girl needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around her. It's not healthy." Her voice was cold in a way I'd never heard before, like she was talking about a stranger she disliked, not her stepdaughter. The next morning at breakfast, she was back to her sweet voice. "I've been thinking about your future, sweetheart," she said, buttering my toast. "Have you considered focusing more on practical skills? Not everyone can be a performer." I stared at her, finally seeing clearly. She wasn't protecting me from disappointment. She was disappointed that I might succeed, but I had no idea how far she was willing to go to stop me. Looking back, the signs had been there from the beginning. I just hadn't recognized them for what they were. When Dad first introduced us, Veronica had seemed genuinely excited to meet me, but I noticed how her smile faltered when Dad bragged about my grades or mentioned my acceptance into the advanced choir program. "She's so accomplished for her age," Dad had said proudly during that first dinner. "Accomplished might be a strong word," Veronica had replied with a laugh. "She's certainly active in school activities." At the time, I thought she was just being modest on my behalf. Now I realized she was already diminishing my achievements. The grooming phase had been masterful. She'd showered me with attention and gifts, making me feel special and chosen. She'd take me to expensive salons where she'd get treatments too, making it feel like we were equals, like I was mature beyond my years. "Most women your age wouldn't appreciate good skincare," she'd say while the esthetician applied a facial mask. "But you're different. You're sophisticated." She'd buy me clothes that were slightly too mature, then praise me for having such refined taste when I wore them. She made me feel like I was her protege, being initiated into some exclusive world of adult femininity. The sabotage started small. My sheet music would mysteriously disappear from my backpack. My costume fittings got rescheduled without my knowledge. When I complained to Dad, Veronica would look genuinely confused. "That's so strange," she'd say, frowning with what seemed like real concern. "Maybe you should be more organized, sweetie. High school can be overwhelming." It was subtle enough that I started questioning myself. Maybe I was being careless. Maybe I was imagining things. But then I noticed a pattern. Every accident happened on days when Veronica was home alone after I left for school. She had a master key to every room in the house. Dad had given it to her when they got married, saying it was important for her to feel like she belonged everywhere. I started finding evidence that she'd been in my room when I wasn't there. My drawers slightly out of order, my journal moved from where I'd hidden it, my clothes rearranged in ways that were almost imperceptible, but definitely deliberate. The psychological warfare intensified gradually. She'd make comments about my appearance that seemed helpful, but left me feeling worse about myself. "That dress is adorable on you," she'd say while adjusting the neckline, "though it does emphasize your hips. Maybe we should look for something more forgiving around your midsection." Or, "Your hair looks so much better when you straighten it. The natural curl is a bit unruly, very bohemian, but not everyone appreciates that aesthetic. She had a gift for backhanded compliments that made me second-guess everything about myself. She'd praise my intelligence while suggesting I was socially awkward. She'd compliment my singing while implying it was just a cute hobby, not real talent. "You have such a sweet voice," she'd say after I'd been practicing. "Very earnest. Not everyone can carry a tune, so that's something to be proud of." The word earnest stung every time. It made me sound naive and amateurish. She started monitoring my friendships, asking detailed questions about my conversations, and subtly planting seeds of doubt about my friends' motives. "Bailey seemed a little jealous when you told her about getting the lead," she'd say thoughtfully. "Sometimes friends have a hard time being supportive when you succeed. You might want to be careful about sharing too much." She'd create artificial emergencies that forced me to miss social events, then comfort me about how disappointed my friends must be. "I'm sure they understand that family comes first," she'd say while rubbing my shoulders. "Real friends would support your priorities." But my friends started pulling away, confused by my frequent cancellations and the subtle changes in my personality. I was becoming more anxious, more self-doubting, less confident in my opinions and abilities. The musical became her primary target once she realized how much it meant to me and how proud Dad was of my involvement. Mrs. Martinez had been directing school productions for 20 years and had never shown this much enthusiasm for a student. She'd pulled me aside after my audition and said I had natural stage presence and a voice that could move people to tears. When I told Dad and Veronica about Mrs. Martinez's praise, Dad beamed with pride. Veronica's reaction was more measured. "That's wonderful, sweetie. Though I suppose she has to be encouraging to all her students. It's part of her job." "She said I was the best audition she'd seen in years," I said, trying to recapture the excitement I'd felt in that moment. "Well, you were probably the best that particular day," Veronica replied with a patronizing smile. "It's important not to read too much into compliments. Adults sometimes exaggerate to boost children's confidence." She began a systematic campaign to undermine my relationship with Mrs. Martinez and my confidence in the production. She'd ask pointed questions about my rehearsal schedule, suggesting that the time commitment was excessive and might interfere with my studies. "Are you sure Mrs. Martinez has your best interests at heart?" she'd wonder aloud. Sometimes teachers get carried away with their own ambitions and forget that students have other priorities. She'd research the musical online and share concerning information about how challenging the lead role was. How many professional actresses had struggled with the same songs I was learning. "I read that this particular show has caused several nervous breakdowns among young performers," she'd say while cutting vegetables for dinner. "The emotional demands can be too much for someone without professional training." She'd time these comments perfectly, right before I had to leave for rehearsal, or when I was already feeling stressed about memorizing lines. She had an instinct for when I was vulnerable and needed support, and those were exactly the moments she'd choose to plant doubt. 2 weeks before opening night, I came home to find Veronica in my room, holding my diary. She wasn't even trying to hide it. "What are you doing?" I demanded, my voice shaking with violation and anger. "I was looking for your costume measurements," she said smoothly, not even bothering to look guilty. "But I found this instead. We need to talk." She'd read everything. My crush on Brandon from chemistry class, my insecurities about Dad preferring her to me, my dreams of getting into Juilliard, my growing suspicion that she didn't actually care about me, my fears about the musical, my confusion about why she seemed to be rooting against me. "Juilliard?" She laughed, her voice dripping with condescension. "Honey, that's not realistic. You need to focus on attainable goals. Community college, maybe a teaching certificate. Something practical for someone with your limitations." "What limitations?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "Well, you're talented for someone from a small town, but real conservatories look for exceptional students. Students who've been training professionally since childhood. Students with natural gifts that can't be taught." She delivered each word like a small knife, cutting away at the confidence I'd been building. "Give me back my diary," I said, my voice shaking with anger and humiliation. "I think your father should read this," she said, flipping through pages with deliberate cruelty, "especially the parts where you write about feeling like an outsider in your own home, and this interesting section about wondering if I actually love you or just pretend to." My blood went cold. I'd written that during a particularly dark moment, questioning everything about our relationship, but feeling guilty for even having those thoughts. "I wrote that months ago," I said desperately, "before we got closer." "Did we get closer?" she asked, tilting her head with mock confusion. "Or did I just get better at managing you?" The mask was completely off now. The sweet stepmother who bought me clothes and painted my nails was gone, replaced by someone cold and calculating. "I know what you're doing," I said quietly. "What am I doing?" she asked, her voice dangerously sweet. "You're jealous." The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek burned as I stared at her in shock. In that moment, she looked exactly like the mean girls at school, except she was supposed to be the adult, the safe person, the one who protected me. "Don't you ever," she hissed, her face contorted with rage, "accuse me of being jealous of a child." But her reaction told me everything I needed to know. "You are jealous," I said, touching my burning cheek. "You can't stand that Dad loves me. You can't stand that I might actually be good at something. You can't stand that people notice me." She raised her hand again, and I flinched, but this time she caught herself. "You know nothing about adult relationships," she said through gritted teeth. "Nothing about what it takes to build a marriage. You're a selfish little girl who thinks the world revolves around her." "No," I said, something clicking into place. "I'm a daughter who thought she was getting a mother figure. But you never wanted to be my stepmother. You wanted me to disappear." That night, I called my mom for the first time in months. She'd moved to Oregon after the divorce and we'd grown distant, partly because Veronica had subtly discouraged our contact, always finding reasons why I couldn't call or visit. "She's building a new life," Veronica would say whenever I mentioned missing Mom. "It's hard for divorced women to move on when their children keep pulling them backward. Maybe you should give her some space to heal." But when I finally called, Mom answered on the first ring. "Delilah?" Mom's voice was surprised but warm. "Is everything okay? You sound upset." The concern in her voice broke something open in me. I realized how much I'd missed having someone who prioritized my well-being over their own agenda. I broke down and told her everything. About Veronica's manipulation, the constant undermining, how she was trying to make me drop out of the musical, the diary violation, the slap, the systematic campaign to destroy my confidence. "Oh, sweetheart," Mom said softly. "I was afraid of this." "What do you mean?" "Your father called me before their wedding. He wanted to make sure I was okay with Veronica being involved in your life. When I looked her up online, I found some concerning things." "Like what?" "She'd been fired from her last job at a high school. Something about inappropriate competition with students. Her supervisor's reference mentioned concerns about boundary issues with teenage girls. And her social media was full of posts about how teenage girls these days are too entitled and need to be put in their place." My stomach dropped. "Why didn't you tell Dad?" "I tried, but he was so happy. And I thought maybe I was just being bitter about the divorce. She was beautiful and young and seemed to adore him. I convinced myself I was seeing problems that weren't there." "What did you find exactly?" "She'd been working as a drama teacher and had been let go after complaints from parents. Apparently, she'd been systematically undermining the confidence of her most talented students, while promoting girls who weren't as gifted but were more manageable. There were allegations that she'd been sabotaging auditions and spreading rumors about students she saw as threats. Threats to what? To her position as the most important woman in the drama department. She needed to be the center of attention, the one everyone looked to for approval. Talented students threatened that dynamic. I felt sick. This wasn't just about me. This was a pattern. There was also a lawsuit from a previous school district, Mom continued. A girl claimed Veronica had deliberately given her wrong information about scholarship deadlines, causing her to miss opportunities. The case was settled out of court, but there were records of the initial filing. "Why didn't you push harder to tell Dad?" "Because I was scared he'd think I was trying to sabotage his happiness out of jealousy. And honestly, part of me hoped I was wrong. I hoped she'd be different with you because you were his daughter." "What do I do now?" "Document everything," Mom said firmly, "and call me if things get worse. I can drive down there in 8 hours if needed. Don't let her isolate you anymore." For the first time in months, I felt like I had an ally. I started recording our conversations on my phone whenever she cornered me alone. I took photos of my missing sheet music when it reappeared in strange places. I screenshot the mysteriously rescheduled appointments. Within a week, I had a clear pattern of deliberate sabotage. But Veronica was getting more desperate as opening night approached. She started spreading rumors to Dad's coworkers about my emotional instability and attention-seeking behavior. She'd mentioned casually at dinner parties how worried she was about my unrealistic expectations, and how hard it was to be a stepmother to a difficult teenager. "I just don't want her to be crushed when she realizes performing isn't her calling," she'd say with fake concern, while Dad's friends nodded sympathetically. "Some children need to learn that participation trophies aren't the same as real talent." She'd share these concerns while I was in earshot, making sure I heard every word. The message was clear. Even Dad's friends thought I was delusional about my abilities. The gaslighting intensified. She'd move my things and then act concerned when I couldn't find them. "You seem really scattered lately, honey," she'd say while helping me search for homework that she'd hidden. "Maybe the pressure of the musical is too much. It's okay to admit when we're overwhelmed." She started monitoring my phone calls, asking detailed questions about who I was talking to and why. When I pushed back, she'd frame it as parental concern. "I'm just looking out for you. Teenage girls can be so influenced by peer pressure. I don't want you making decisions based on what your friends think you should do." She convinced Dad to implement new rules about my phone usage, claiming she'd read articles about social media's impact on teenage mental health. "Delilah's been spending too much time online," she'd say during family meetings that felt more like interventions. "I think it's contributing to her anxiety about the musical." I wasn't anxious about the musical until she started making me anxious about it. She began inviting her friends over for coffee, timing their visits for when I'd be practicing at home. They'd sit in the living room, talking loudly about their own children's realistic achievements, while I tried to run through my songs upstairs. "My daughter Emily is so smart for choosing accounting," one would say. "Creative fields are so unstable. Emily will always have job security." "Exactly," Veronica would agree. I keep trying to explain to Delilah that passion projects should stay as hobbies. It's better to be practical. They discussed this while looking pointedly at the stairs, making sure I could hear every word about how some parents were doing their children a disservice by encouraging unrealistic dreams. 3 days before opening night, I found her in the garage, holding my costume. It was shredded beyond repair. Not torn, but deliberately cut with scissors in a way that made it completely unwearable. "Oh no!" she gasped dramatically when she saw me, clutching the destroyed fabric to her chest. "I was trying to press it for you and the steamer malfunctioned. I'm so sorry, honey." The steamer was unplugged and sitting on a shelf across the garage. And fabric doesn't shred like that from steam damage. I could see the clean scissor cuts where she'd methodically destroyed hours of costume department work. "You destroyed it on purpose," I said, my voice flat with the weight of finally having undeniable proof. "That's a very serious accusation," she replied, her eyes cold despite her concerned tone. "I think you're under too much stress. Maybe this is a sign that you should step down from the lead role. Sometimes the universe sends us messages. I'll wear something else." With 3 days' notice? "Honey, be realistic. The other girls have been preparing their backup roles for weeks. You can't just throw something together and expect it to work. The show deserves someone who's properly prepared. But I was done being realistic according to Veronica's definition. I called Mrs. Martinez and explained what happened. Careful not to directly accuse Veronica, but making it clear the costume had been deliberately destroyed. Mrs. Martinez was at our house within an hour, with the drama department's emergency costume collection. When Veronica answered the door, her face went white with surprise and barely concealed anger. Delilah told me about the accident, Mrs. Martinez said politely but with steel in her voice. These things happen. Luckily, we have backup options that should work beautifully. Actually, Veronica said quickly, clearly panicking, I've been thinking Delilah might be overwhelmed. Maybe she should consider what? Dad's voice came from behind her. He'd just gotten home from work. Mrs. Martinez turned to him with a warm smile that didn't quite hide her suspicion about what she'd walked into. I was just telling Veronica how proud you should be. Delilah is the most talented student I've taught in 15 years. We actually have a representative from the state university coming to see her perform Friday night. Dad's eyes lit up with genuine pride. Really? That's incredible. I had no idea. Oh, she's been modest about it, Mrs. Martinez said, watching Veronica's face carefully. Sometimes the most gifted students are their own worst critics. But the University Scout specifically requested to see her after hearing her audition recording. I watched Veronica's face cycle through emotions, surprise, anger, calculation, before settling on forced enthusiasm that didn't reach her eyes. That's wonderful news, she said through gritted teeth. We're so proud of her. After Mrs. Martinez left, Veronica cornered me in the hallway while Dad was in the shower. You think you're so smart, she whispered. Her mask completely dropped. But you have no idea what you're dealing with. What's that supposed to mean? She smiled, but it was the cold smile of someone planning revenge. Opening night is in 3 days. A lot can happen in 3 days. Accidents, last-minute emergencies, food poisoning, technology failures. The theater world is so unpredictable. The threat was crystal clear. You wouldn't, I said, though I knew she absolutely would. Wouldn't what? I'm just observing that high school productions are notorious for things going wrong. Equipment failures, student illnesses, family emergencies that require leads to step down at the last minute. She was laying out her sabotage plan like a warning and a promise. That night, I heard her on the phone in her office, speaking in hushed tones. I need you to do me a favor, Derek, she was saying. There's this little performance at the high school Friday night. I need something to go wrong. Nothing dangerous, just embarrassing enough that she'll never want to perform again. I pressed my ear to the door, my heart racing. I don't care what it costs. Mess with the sound system, cause a power outage, anything that would force them to cancel or restart. This has to stop before it goes any further. Derek was her brother, the one who worked in tech and had always given me the creeps during family dinners, making inappropriate comments about how I was developing and would drive boys crazy when I got older. She's getting too much attention, Veronica continued. People are starting to think she's special. Tom's already talking about college funds and private lessons. This needs to end now before she gets any more ideas about herself. What if someone gets hurt? Derek asked. Nobody's going to get hurt. Just make it look like equipment failure. Make her look incompetent. Make it clear she's not ready for this kind of responsibility. I immediately called my mom, whispering frantically into the phone. We need to involve your father now, she said after I told her about the phone call. This has crossed the line from emotional abuse into active sabotage. What she's planning could be criminal. But what if Dad doesn't believe me? Then I'm driving down there tonight, and we're going to have a family meeting he'll never forget. But first, you need to get that recording to someone official. But I wanted to handle this myself first. I'd spent months being manipulated and undermined. It was time to turn the tables and use her own tactics against her. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I loudly announced at breakfast that I was having second thoughts about the musical and considering dropping out. Maybe you're right, I said to Veronica, watching her eyes light up with triumph. I'm probably not ready for this kind of pressure. What if I embarrass myself in front of all those people? Her entire demeanor changed instantly, becoming warm and supportive. I think that's very mature of you, sweetheart. There will be other opportunities when you're older and more experienced. High school is about learning, not about putting yourself in situations where you might fail publicly. Actually, I continued, I was wondering if you could call Mrs. Martinez for me. I'm too embarrassed to quit myself. Could you explain that I'm having anxiety attacks and need to step down? Of course, honey. I'll take care of everything. You don't need to worry about disappointing anyone. I'll handle all the difficult conversations. She practically skipped to her office to make the call. What she didn't know was that I'd already spoken to Mrs. Martinez and warned her about what was coming. If my stepmother calls to say I'm dropping out, I told her, please don't believe her, and please record the conversation if possible. I think she's going to try to sabotage the production. 20 minutes later, Veronica emerged looking confused and frustrated. That was strange, she said, clearly trying to maintain her helpful facade. Mrs. Martinez said she needed to speak with you directly about any changes to the cast. Something about union rules and official documentation. Oh, that's fine, I said casually. I'll call her later and sort it out. But I didn't call. Instead, I went to school and continued rehearsing like nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Veronica spent the day making increasingly frantic calls to the school, trying to reach someone, anyone, who would listen to her concerns about my stage fright and emotional instability. Each person she spoke to, the principal, the guidance counselor, the vice principal, even the athletic director, had already been briefed by Mrs. Martinez about a concerned parent who might try to interfere with the production due to what appeared to be jealousy issues. We see this sometimes with blended families, the principal told her coldly when she tried to insist I was having a breakdown. Competition between step-parents and step-children. We're trained to recognize it. I'm not competing with anyone, Veronica had protested. I'm concerned about her mental health. Then I suggest you speak with a family counselor, the principal replied, because trying to pull a student from a production 3 days before opening night raises red flags for us. By evening, Veronica was furious and barely containing her rage. Why haven't you called Mrs. Martinez? She demanded when I got home from rehearsal. Oh, I decided not to quit after all, I said cheerfully, watching her face turn red. I talked to my friends, and they convinced me to stick with it. They said I'd regret giving up on my dreams. Her face went through a series of expressions: shock, anger, calculation, before settling on barely controlled fury. Delilah, she said slowly, her voice dangerously low. We had an agreement. No, we had a conversation. I never agreed to anything. And after thinking about it, I realized you might be wrong about me not being good enough. That's when she made her biggest mistake. You little bitch, she snarled, dropping all pretense of motherly concern. You think you can manipulate me? I've been playing this game longer than you've been alive. I held up my phone, which had been recording the entire conversation. I know, I said calmly. I've been recording you for weeks. The color drained from her face completely. You recorded me without consent. That's illegal in most states. Actually, it's not. This is a one-party consent state. I can record any conversation I'm part of. I looked it up. I'd done extensive research with my mom's help. Plus, I continued, I have photos of my destroyed costume, documentation of all the sabotage, screenshots of the mysteriously rescheduled appointments, and a recording of you hiring your brother to interfere with the school production. Veronica stared at me like I'd grown a second head. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked genuinely afraid. What do you want? She asked quietly. I want you to leave me alone. No more sabotage, no more undermining, no more fake concern. You're going to show up Friday night, smile and clap, and pretend to be the proud stepmother you should have been all along. And if I don't, then Dad gets to hear everything, along with the school board, since you tried to manipulate school officials. And Derek's employer, since using company resources for personal vendettas is generally frowned upon in the corporate world. She was trapped, and she knew it. You're making a mistake, she said finally, trying one last manipulation. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. The entertainment industry is brutal to young women. No, I replied firmly. You were trying to protect yourself from my success because it threatened your position as the center of Dad's attention. The truth hung between us like a sword. You're just a child, she whispered. You don't understand adult relationships. I understand enough to know that healthy adults don't compete with children. They support them. That night, she kept her distance. But I could feel her watching me, planning something. I'd won this battle, but the war wasn't over. Opening night arrived, and Veronica kept her word. Sort of. She sat in the front row with Dad, smiling and recording everything on her phone like the proud stepmother she was supposed to be. But I could see the hatred in her eyes every time the spotlight hit me. The performance was magical. Every note soared, every line landed with emotional truth I hadn't known I possessed. The audience was completely silent during my solo numbers, hanging on every word. During the climactic song, I saw people in the audience wiping away tears. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes, with calls for an encore that weren't traditional for high school productions. The energy in the theater was electric, transformative. The university representative introduced herself afterward, a woman named Dr. Chen who taught voice at the State Conservatory. I've been doing talent scouting for 20 years, she said, and I rarely see raw talent like yours. We'd like to offer you a preliminary audition for our program, full scholarship. Dad was crying with pride, something I'd never seen before. I can't believe how talented you are, he kept saying, hugging me tight. Why didn't I know you could sing like that? I glanced at Veronica, who was maintaining her forced smile while her knuckles went white from gripping her purse. Maybe because someone convinced you it was just a hobby, I said pointedly. That night, as we celebrated at dinner, Dad started talking about calling my mom to share the good news. She should hear this from us, he said enthusiastically. She'll be so proud. We should probably start looking at music schools too. If you got a scholarship offer after one performance. Actually, I said, Mom already knows. We've been talking regularly. Dad looked surprised and a little hurt. You have? Since when? Since I needed someone who actually supported my dreams instead of trying to crush them. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Dad looked between Veronica and me, finally starting to sense the undercurrents he'd been missing for months. Is there something I should know? He asked carefully. Veronica and I locked eyes across the table. She was silently begging me not to destroy her life. Nothing important, she said quickly. Just typical teenage drama. You know how girls can be. Is that what you call it? I asked. Delilah, she warned, her voice sharp. But I was done being warned, done being silenced. Done protecting the feelings of someone who had spent months trying to destroy mine. Dad, there's something you need to know about your wife. And then I told him everything. The gaslighting, the sabotage, the destroyed costume, the phone call to Derek. I played him the recordings. I showed him the documentation. I walked him through months of systematic emotional abuse disguised as stepmother concern. She read my diary without permission, I continued. She slapped me when I called her out on her jealousy. She tried to convince the school that I was having a mental breakdown. She hired her brother to sabotage tonight's performance. With each piece of evidence, Dad's face grew more horrified and angry. The university scout tonight? I added. She tried to prevent me from performing, so I'd never get that opportunity. Veronica, Dad said finally, his voice deadly quiet. Is this true? She tried to deny it at first, claiming I was exaggerating and being dramatic. Then she tried to justify it, saying she was trying to protect me from disappointment. Finally, she broke down crying about how hard it was to be a stepmother, how she felt excluded from our relationship, how I had rejected her from the beginning. I was trying to help her develop realistic expectations, she sobbed, mascara running down her cheeks. The world is cruel to young women with impossible dreams. I didn't want her to get her hopes up only to be crushed. Impossible dreams? Dad repeated, his voice rising with each word. She just got offered a university scholarship. After one performance. That's not guaranteed to lead anywhere. Enough! I'd never heard Dad yell like that. The restaurant went quiet. You systematically tried to destroy my daughter's confidence and sabotage her opportunities, he said, his voice shaking with controlled rage. You lied to me about her behavior and abilities. You manipulated everyone around you to serve your own agenda. Tom, please, you have to understand. I understand perfectly. Dad cut her off. Our marriage was based on lies. Every time you told me Delilah was difficult or unrealistic or attention-seeking, you were projecting your own insecurities onto a child. She came between us. She's my daughter. Dad roared. She's supposed to be important to me. A real stepmother would have celebrated that, not tried to eliminate the competition. Veronica looked at me with pure hatred then. All pretense finally dropped. This is what you wanted, isn't it? She hissed. To break up our family? To have him all to yourself again? No, I said honestly, and I meant it. I wanted a stepmother who actually loved me, but you never did. You just saw me as competition for Dad's attention and affection. I tried to love you. No, you tried to control me. There's a difference. Dad stood up from the table, throwing his napkin down. We're leaving. And Veronica, I want you out of my house by tomorrow. You can't mean that. We're married. We have a life together. We had a life built on your lies and manipulation, Dad said. I won't live with someone who emotionally abuses my daughter. The drive home was silent except for my quiet crying. Not from sadness, but from relief. Dad reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm sorry, he said simply. I should have seen what was happening. Veronica left the next morning while I was at school, taking only her clothes and personal items. Dad filed for divorce that afternoon. I talked to a lawyer, he told me that evening. What she did, the sabotage, the manipulation, trying to interfere with your education, it's actually illegal in some contexts. If you want to press charges, I just want her gone, I said. I don't want to see her ever again. The lawyer said we have grounds for a restraining order if she tries to contact you. Do you think she will? I think she's too smart to risk criminal charges, but we'll be prepared if she does. The divorce proceedings were ugly. Veronica's lawyer tried to paint me as a manipulative teenager who had deliberately sabotaged their marriage out of jealousy. But the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings, documentation, witness statements from school officials. Mrs. Martinez testified about Veronica's attempts to interfere with the production. The principal spoke about her inappropriate phone calls. Even some of Dad's coworkers came forward to say they'd found her comments about me concerning. Derek lost his job when his employer discovered he'd been using company equipment to plan sabotage of a school event. Apparently, the FBI takes cyber attacks on educational institutions very seriously, even small-scale ones. 3 months later, I got my acceptance letter to the university with a full scholarship. Not partial, but full. They'd been impressed enough by my audition to increase their offer. Dad framed the letter and hung it in the living room where Veronica's wedding photos used to be. I'm proud of you, he said that night as we ate takeout Chinese food. Not just for the scholarship, but for standing up for yourself, for not letting her break you. She almost did, I admitted. There were times I believed her. Times I thought maybe I wasn't good enough, but you didn't give up. That's what matters. I had help. Mom, Mrs. Martinez, even some of my friends who noticed something was wrong. Dad nodded. I should have been part of that support system. I should have listened when you tried to tell me. I never directly told you, because she trained you not to. That's what manipulators do. They isolate their victims and make them feel like no one will believe them. He was right. Veronica had been playing a long game, slowly eroding my confidence while building herself up as the reasonable adult who was just trying to help. The important thing is that it's over now, I said. Dad nodded firmly. And I'm never letting anyone treat you like that again. Anyone who comes into our lives has to respect you, or they don't stay. 2 years later, I started college with a double major in music and psychology. I wanted to understand how people like Veronica operated, so I could help other kids who found themselves in similar situations. The transition to college was challenging in ways I hadn't expected. Having my confidence systematically attacked for months had left deeper scars than I realized. I struggled with imposter syndrome, constantly second-guessing my abilities despite positive feedback from professors. Dr. Chen became not just my voice teacher, but a mentor who helped me rebuild the foundation Veronica had tried to destroy. Talent is like a plant, she told me during one of our early lessons. It can survive harsh conditions, but it thrives with proper care. What you experienced was like having someone pour poison on your roots. We need to help you grow strong again. She introduced me to other students who'd overcome difficult backgrounds. I learned that many successful performers had stories of people who'd tried to discourage them, family members who'd undermined their confidence, teachers who'd told them they weren't good enough. The industry is full of people who survived someone trying to kill their dreams, Dr. Chen said. In some ways, it makes you stronger. You learn to validate yourself instead of relying on others for approval. During my sophomore year, I got a friend request on social media from someone named Chloe. Her message was heartbreaking. I saw your interview about emotional abuse by step-parents. My stepmom is doing the same things to me. She says she's protecting me from disappointment, but really she's trying to stop me from succeeding. She makes me feel stupid and worthless. Can you help? I spent 2 hours on the phone with Chloe that night. teaching her everything I'd learned about documentation, support systems, and standing up for herself. I helped her identify the manipulation tactics and gave her strategies for protecting her self-esteem. The most important thing, I told her, is to remember that her behavior says nothing about your worth and everything about her insecurities. 6 months later, she sent me a photo of herself accepting an award for her science fair project, the same project her stepmother had tried to convince her to drop because science isn't for girls like you. "Thank you for showing me I wasn't crazy," she wrote. "You saved my life." That's when I realized Veronica had given me something valuable after all, though she never intended to. She'd taught me how to recognize manipulation and fight back against people who try to dim other people's light out of their own insecurity and jealousy. I started a blog about surviving toxic family dynamics, sharing my story and offering resources for other young people in similar situations. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of messages from teenagers dealing with step-parents, siblings, and even biological parents who were systematically undermining their confidence. One message particularly stuck with me. "My stepmom tells me I'm too ugly to be an actress, but then posts pictures of herself from high school on social media, talking about how she could have been a model if she'd had the opportunities. I think she's living vicariously through tearing me down." Another wrote, "My stepdad says I'm not smart enough for pre-med, but I found out he failed organic chemistry twice in college. He's telling me I can't do something he couldn't do himself." The pattern was always the same. Adults projecting their own failures and insecurities onto the children in their care, disguising emotional abuse as realistic guidance. I started running workshops for teenagers dealing with toxic family dynamics. My favorite session is called "When Adults Act Like Mean Girls," because that's exactly what Veronica had been. A grown woman who saw a teenager as competition and tried to eliminate the threat through systematic psychological warfare. The workshops covered identifying manipulation tactics, documenting abuse, building support networks, and most importantly, maintaining self-worth in the face of constant criticism. Remember, I'd tell the groups, healthy adults don't feel threatened by children's success, they celebrate it. If someone in your life is trying to convince you to aim lower, ask yourself what they gain from your failure. Dad remarried 3 years ago to a wonderful woman named Patricia, who celebrated my graduation by throwing me the party Veronica never would have. She genuinely cheers for my successes instead of trying to diminish them, and she treats my achievements as something that adds to our family rather than threatens it. "I don't understand women who compete with children," Patricia said once when we were discussing my experience with Veronica. "A healthy adult wants to lift kids up, not tear them down." Patricia had her own teenage daughter from her first marriage, and watching their relationship showed me what a normal stepmother-stepdaughter dynamic looked like. Patricia celebrated Melissa's accomplishments, supported her through failures, and never made her feel like her presence was a threat to anyone. "The goal isn't to replace anyone," Patricia explained when I asked about her parenting philosophy. "It's to add love to a family. There's always room for more love." As for Veronica, I heard through the grapevine that she's gone through 2 more marriages since Dad. Both ended when her stepchildren's parents discovered her pattern of undermining the kids to make herself feel superior. The most recent divorce was particularly ugly. Her third husband's teenage son recorded her calling him worthless and posted it online. The video went viral with the caption, "Why I don't trust stepmoms." She had to change her name and move to another state. Her behavior had finally caught up with her in a way that couldn't be hidden or explained away. I felt a complex mix of emotions when I heard about her downfall. Part of me felt vindicated, proof that I hadn't been the problem. But mostly I felt sad for all the children she'd hurt over the years, all the dreams she'd tried to crush because of her own damaged psyche. Derek, her brother, lost his job when his employer discovered he'd been using company equipment to sabotage a high school production. The investigation revealed a pattern of using his technical skills for personal vendettas, including helping Veronica interfere with students at her previous jobs. Some people never learn that trying to destroy others only destroys themselves in the end, but some of us do learn. We learn to recognize toxic behavior, to document it, to seek help, and to fight back when necessary. Most importantly, we learn that someone else's jealousy and insecurity says nothing about our worth and everything about their character. I'm 22 now, about to graduate with honors and already accepted to graduate school with a fellowship to study music therapy. I perform regularly and teach voice lessons to help pay for school. Every time I step on stage, I think about that night when Veronica tried so hard to stop me from shining. She failed. And that failure taught me the most valuable lesson of all. No one can dim your light unless you let them. The irony isn't lost on me that Veronica's attempt to sabotage my musical career actually strengthened my resolve and led me to discover my true calling, not just as a performer, but as someone who helps other young people overcome the adults who try to crush their spirits. Sometimes the people who try to destroy us end up being the very ones who show us how strong we really are.